Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Naina Chudiwala, class of 2020, Praxis Business School. A warm welcome to the first TEDx event of Praxis Business School. As a part of TED Rules, we begin our event by playing the introductory TED video.
Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
The theme for our TED event is equity and equality. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. While equality focuses on input, the concept of equity lays importance on the outcome. It gives me immense pleasure to invite our first speaker today, Ms. Shital Kakkar Mehra, India's leading executive presence coach for CEOs, founder at GoBarefoot and Katalyst, and a best-selling author. Shital has personally trained 45,000 professionals across Asia and has been a guest speaker for leading management institutes and associations. She is an active philanthropist and founder at Katalyst, an NGO for underprivileged girls. Her another venture, Go Barefoot, is a professional networking platform for development professionals. Her second book, Executive Presence, The Poised Formula for Leadership, was declared bestseller by Amazon. Her articles regularly feature in Economic Times, Business Today, Times of India, amongst others. Please welcome Ms. Shital Kakkar Mehra. Ms. Mehra will speak about the concepts of equity and equality from a gender perspective.
Gender equity and gender equality in the Indian workplace. What do these terms mean and what is the difference between them? Gender equality is offering equal opportunities and getting outcomes from men, women, and gender diverse groups. Gender equity, on the other hand, is the process to achieve gender equality. While equality ensures that theoretically each person is given equal opportunities, equity recognizes that due to cultural and historical reasons, women have not had the same start as men. We know that investing in gender equity leads to sustainable economic development. More importantly, how can you ignore the needs of 50% of the population? It's about being fair. It's about agreeing that support needs to be provided to the group that needs it the most. Looking at the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Index 2020, the top 5 highlights for India are: India slips 28 places and is currently ranked at 140 out of 156 nations. Share of women in professional and technical fields has decreased. Percentage of women in labor force participation has gone down. Only 8.9% of firms in India are led by women leaders. Estimated income earned by an Indian woman is 1/5 of that of the men. Despite all this, 96% parity has been achieved in primary, secondary, and tertiary education. However, gender gap persists when it comes to literacy. 34% of Indian women are illiterate compared to only 17% men. We know that educating a woman is vital for economic development. An educated woman uplifts her life. An educated woman displays a direct connect with population control because she will have fewer children. An educated woman reduces the chance of her child dying before the age of 5. Also, she promises a bright future for the country because women who are educated ensure that their children are also educated. While the Constitution promises equal rights to every citizen, the ground reality in our country is very different. We are going to look at gender equity measures in 3 parts. Part 1, the 14 years of school life. Part 2, the few yet extremely impactful years of college life. And part 3, the 3 or 4 decades that we spent in the workplace. And we are going to analyze all this to see the interplay of our societal biases, infrastructure support, and of course, our cultural mindset, which has been framed over generations. So let's start with school. The Right to Education Act of 2009 ensures free education up to the age of 14. And numbers show that we are doing extremely well in primary school. It's only after the age of puberty, roughly around 11 to 12 years of age, that the dropout number starts climbing drastically for girls. The most common reasons given are 1, inadequate school facilities. Roughly 23 million girls drop out of school every year due to inadequate facilities related to menstrual hygiene. Secondly, there's scarcity of lady teachers, especially in the rural area. When you combine this with the fact that we have a mindset problem when it comes to co-education, this directly means very few schools for our girls. Also, financial difficulties leads parents to prioritize the son's education over the daughter's. And finally, lack of role models. It's very tough to convince these girls why they need to study more and how it is going to change their life, because they have no role models in their homes, in their schools, in their hometowns or villages. So how can we promote gender equity in schools? First of all, let's break gender stereotypes. Let's stop promoting the concept of men as macho, bread earners, women as maternal, and therefore good as caregivers. Secondly, let's bridge the confidence gap. There is adequate research to show that girls between the ages of 8 and 14 have 30% less confidence compared to boys in the same age group. This, despite the fact that girls outperform boys academically in the same age and stage. So what is this gap due to? It's dwelling excessively on negative feelings about themselves, in their ability to take risks, and lowers their ability to try something new. This lack of confidence also makes them set unrealistically high targets for themselves, which leads to failure and, of course, is a start of another problem called perfectionism. At this stage, girls are low on self-confidence and they frequently doubt their ability to succeed. By ensuring equal participation in schools, they can help bridge the confidence gap. Traditionally, boys are assigned roles like accounting, timekeeping, where girls are given opportunities in housekeeping like arranging furniture and making rangoli. Boys are given leadership roles which require public speaking, while girls are called shy and are never given enough opportunities to speak or even speak up. Secondly, curriculum needs to be made gender sensitive. Let's have inspiring stories about women leaders. Let's teach our boys how to spot discrimination in our history books, in our movies, in our theater. in our news channels, for example. Also, enhance the role of pedagogy in gender discrimination. Finally, let's bring gender socialization early in to this game. Don't make separate rows for boys and girls. Let them interact. This singular step is going to ensure healthy relationships in college as well as in the workplace. Finally, we need to provide support. If girls are weak in certain subjects, offer remedial classes in good time so that they don't fail. Because research has shown, and there's enough data to back it, that once they fail, they leave school permanently and never go back to education. Weakness in English is a huge bottleneck, and fluency in the subject adds to their confidence. Weakness in math shakes their self belief. However, fluency in the subject helps them feel more confident. So, let's bridge the confidence gap. Next stage is college. In theory, college campuses are intended to be level playing fields which will break stereotypes and societal barriers. In reality, there exist unique challenges when it comes to equity on campuses. The biggest challenge is poor gender ratios. Traditionally, law, management, STEM disciplines, even our haloed IITs suffer from huge gender imbalance. It's very interesting to note that this leads to a very high level of acceptance on the part of the girls to skewed power balance. Boys, being in the majority, remain insensitive to sexual innuendos and jokes. Girls, being in the minority, display huge level of tolerance for this behavior because otherwise they risk isolation and bullying. So they put up with barbs. The milder ones being boys need better jobs on campus because girls anyway are passing time till they settle down. Lack of healthy relationship between genders also leads to an overly sexualized campus and further isolates the female students. So, how do we promote equity on our college campuses? First of all, let's start with the faculty, whose role cannot be emphasized enough. Being big spheres of influence, students model their behavior and copy the behavior of the faculty. Secondly, let's challenge gender roles through conversations, societies, debate, theater, poetry. Conversations can focus on the strengths and the gaps in our society and work towards breaking stereotypes. Let's create conversations to bust common generalizations like men don't do housework, men control all economic assets because women lack financial literacy, men are bread earners, and women are lucky if they have a husband who can earn and support them. Frank chats about sexual consent. No means no. Harassment will help young boys understand that safety of the girl child in your campus, in your country, is not a woman's issue. It's a men's issue. Let's involve the boys on campus to find answers on how society can offer physical safety to its women. Let's agree. Student activism can bring huge change, and it has in different parts of the world. Finally, the workplace. There are several generalizations and stereotypes which affect the way women are treated in the workplace. Unconscious bias is everywhere. Firstly, men get promoted more frequently because they are more aggressive than women. Secondly, after a certain age, women will struggle with work-life balance. So it's better they don't get promoted because they can't give 100% to leadership roles. Thirdly, women are too mild. They may not be able to put up with the pressure of leadership. And finally, young women have to put up with age discrimination. What's the point in investing in this girl? Because she will get pregnant and go away. On the other hand, a male leader is seen as constant, decisive, powerful, almost superhero-like qualities. Women leaders, on the other hand, are seen as too weak, too mild, too sensitive. In reality, nothing is further from the truth. We have seen during the pandemic Countries which were led by women leaders outperformed those which were led by men leaders. Women leadership tends to be more inclusive, community driven, led by consensus rather by dictating the rules, as well as collaborating, where everybody feels that they are involved and participating and taking ownership. At Katalyst, an NGO I co-founded, we did an impact study and tracked women engineers in the workplace who had graduated from our program and versus those which were not a part of our program. Our girls from lower income backgrounds performed 42% better than those who were not a part of the program. What was the competitive edge? Our program gives them the confidence and instills self-belief, which directly impacted their performance at work. 94% of our students reported higher confidence levels due to better English speaking skills, which is critical for career growth in our country. While you can start by hiring more women, but the pipeline breaks down mid-career. Women who opted for self-employment, entrepreneurial journey, cited 3 reasons. Flexibility of working hours, lack of resources to support childcare, and of course, work-life balance. To achieve greater diversity in the workplace, companies just need to ask 2 questions. Is our initial diversity pipeline breaking down somewhere in the process? If yes, where? And simply fix it. A few measures can help. One key element is providing employee support and benefits to women. Secondly, leaders can lead by example. A simple example, companies where leaders use family leave benefits. Otherwise, these women who use these benefits would feel it will come at the cost of future career development. Data clearly shows that companies with favorable gender ratios, there are more women at mid-level and a very strong pipeline for leadership positions. Progress has to be both top-down and bottom-up. Finally, media is a very powerful tool and it can play a very good role in breaking gender stereotypes. Advertisements show mothers cooking multiple dishes using exotic spices. I'm presuming it is after a full day in the office. Advertisements rarely show fathers cooking. In fact, our movies always show men in kitchen as a comedy scene. Urban men display cooking skills simply by brewing a cup of coffee for a good-looking neighbor who is visiting. Celebrate the concept of new fatherhood. Change the narrative on house husbands. Show healthy workplace relationship between genders. Culturally, we have great role models for brother-sister, father-daughter, mother-son relationships. Let's create healthy role models for interacting with women in school, in colleges, and in the workplace. Fortunately, technology has been a great game changer and has helped bridge the gender gap. Today, women can work and network from the safety of their homes. I would like to end with the famous quote, equal rights for others does not mean fewer rights for you. It's not a pie.
Thank you, Shital ma'am, for your wonderful speech. Now, let's put our hands together for our next speaker, Mr. Santosh Desai, MD and CEO, Future Brands India, author, columnist, and a social commentator. And most important for all of us, a member of the Board of Governors at Praxis Business School since its establishment. A postgraduate from IIM Ahmedabad, his interest lies in studying the evolving nature of consumer culture in India. He has been the president of McCain Erickson, served on the board of ING Vaishya Bank, and is currently on the boards of Oxfam India and DB Corp Limited. Mr. Desai has been writing a weekly column in the Times of India for 16 years and is the author of the best-selling Mother Pious Lady, Making Sense of Everyday India, a book that examines how everyday life of middle-class India has evolved. He wears two hats, one as an authoritative voice in matters relating to brands and consumers, and the other as a social commentator making sense of the complex changes India is undergoing. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Santosh Desai.
Hi. Why equality is not enough. That's what I'm here to talk to you about over the course of the next 18 minutes or so. On the face of it, the idea of equity and equality seem like very similar ideas. I mean, is there really a difference? Or are we just engaging in some semantic quibbling? I mean, broadly, both ideas seem to be desirable. Surely we should move to a world where both are available to everyone, where there is the idea that everyone has a fair shot at building their lives with equal opportunity. And equity seems, in a sense, to be just a slice of that idea. And isn't equality of opportunity a fair way of thinking about change? Isn't that what we are really looking for? That everyone, regardless of their position, their circumstance, their background, their sexual orientation, their caste, their race, all of them have the same chance of making good in life and doing what they really set out to do. It's not that simple. I mean, I think as one will see, there are several instances in which real meaningful equality becomes very difficult to achieve without a measure of equity. If the playing field is heavily skewed, if it is heavily skewed in the favor of a certain section of society, then without trying to correct that essential underlying imbalance, it becomes extremely difficult to provide equality of opportunity that is meaningful. Those underlying differences, those imbalances always surface in the eventual outcome. In many cases, we understand this instinctively, and we don't have a problem with this. We understand that equity, which involves the disproportionate allocation of resources and attention to those sections that need it more, instead of thinking about it as everyone having the right to the same kind of access. That idea we are able to accept quite easily. A great example of this is in vaccine distribution. I mean, when that is, nobody has really had a problem with the fact that when we started distributing vaccines, given the fact that supply would always be limited at the outset, there was no problem about the fact that we would prioritize the oldest, the most vulnerable people first. So the 60 plus people were the first to get the vaccines. Then came those above 45 and those with comorbidities, because again, they were vulnerable. And then finally, we went down the age spectrum, which is what we are still doing. It was very clear and easy to accept the fact that we did not go the way of saying that, everybody has the same democratic right to a vaccine, and therefore everyone should, regardless of their age or where they come from or their background, should have the same level of access to the vaccine. We understood that equity was more important in this case than just a blind form of equality. In several other areas, however, we find it quite difficult to accept this same principle. Some people, by virtue of their vulnerability, this idea that those people need to be looked after a little more than others. Even when it comes to vaccines, we see this reservation, this sort of a sense of not being able to accept this principle at work, and it shows in perhaps a very telling way the fact that there is no vaccine equity across countries, and that some nations have virtually finished vaccinating all the people, and there are others that are struggling. 14%, countries with 14% of the population of the world have 53% of the vaccines. And that's a huge skew. More significantly, the leading developed countries of the world have enough vaccines to vaccinate their entire populations many times. So Canada 6 times, USA 4.5 times, the EU 2.5 times, while there are 10 African countries that have zero vaccine availability. And this is a staggering kind of an imbalance that is taking place. What makes it worse is the fact that this is entirely irrational. The fact of the matter is that unless everybody in the world is vaccinated, nobody is safe. Tomorrow, you can well imagine that, in Africa, there will be, could well be a surge of cases, and variants would get free play, and it is possible that a variant emerges that the rest of the world, even the vaccinated world, finds very difficult to counter. It's interesting if you take another example of a very different kind while talking about the same subject. We all went through in India the recent scarcity of oxygen, of beds, of tests, of vital medicines. All of us went through this sense of desperation as we hunted high and low to find people we knew the facilities that so badly needed. What was noteworthy was that this was once where it didn't really matter if you were an important person, if you are well connected, if you are well healed. None of it made a difference. It was impossible to get access to these resources because they simply had run out. On the face of it, we were experiencing an equality of scarcity, a level playing field of, if you like, despair, of desperation, of hopelessness. Everyone was in the same boat. And this was much commented upon. The fact that, this is what it feels like to be somebody without the means, without access, and that sense of helplessness everyone got to feel. That being said, there was still a huge difference in the levels of privilege, in the levels of access. The people who were used, the middle class, the upper middle class, the well-connected, who were used to having their way, still had access to social media. They had their own extensive networks that they were working in order to get access to the resources they needed. They had, most significantly, an ability to process information. They could make sense of what was worthwhile and what was not. They had the physical means to have people running from hospital to hospital, figuring out who had beds available. It was possible for them to harness an enormous, if you like, a network of help and support. They had also access to devices of various kinds, from the smartphone to simple thing like an oximeter, which when you go down the strata and you go across town classes, there are so many places where there is no access to them. There is no way of interpreting, the results of those readings. So there is a huge difference, and this is the difference between equality. We all may have had the same equality of scarcity, but we did not have the same equality of access, and that's where the question of equity comes in. The other issue, and this is a very contentious issue in India, is that of reservations, because that is one place where we see the principle of equity at work, where there are sections of society that are given a disproportionate advantage because of their historical, the fact that they come from a historical disadvantage, which is impossible to undo, in one generation, and therefore gradually there is an attempt to correct and redress the imbalance. This often raises the question, and I'm sure some of you have asked this question too, of merit, saying, is this fair? Is it fair to penalize others who are, as you see it, as we see it, meritorious for those who simply have had a disadvantage? And does therefore identity trump merit? This is a question that is often asked, and it is felt very often that this is extremely unfair to penalize those who have the ability. It's very interesting that, when we talk about that ability, when we talk of that merit, what we forget is the fact that merit sits on top of a pile of various kinds of capitals. We have an economic capital that a lot of us have, which we don't really consider because we look, above us and we say, oh, there are so many people who are much better off than we are. But we forget the fact that we have the means that a lot of people do not. Social, we have a degree of social respect. We don't have to worry about how our surname is going to be processed by people. We have the confidence, the social confidence, and it seems very normal to us. It doesn't seem special. That's, we were born that way and we've always been treated that way, and it seems like it's par for the course. We have cultural capital of a kind, the people we know, the fact that, we come from a certain background. And the mental capital also, because success is not a distant idea. It's not a stranger to us. It's something that we expect of ourselves. And therefore, we are able to enact it quite easily. So that, if you look at the kind of capitals we have, it's not just money. It's the fact that we come from backgrounds that understand the value of education. We have support systems of various kinds. We are able to invest in education, whether it's institutions, whether it is the fact that in terms of time, there is social respect that we have. There is, dinner time conversations are all in some ways geared either towards exposing ourselves to the wider world, the kind of friends that we have. It's an entire ecosystem of privilege, all of which we think of as being so perfectly normal that we do not acknowledge it. When we are victims, we acknowledge absences, we acknowledge imbalances. When we are the beneficiaries, it seems to be natural, it seems to be our right, it seems to be just and fair. And therefore, what we call merit, not all of it, some of it is undoubtedly a personal ability, but a lot of it comes because of the kind of backgrounds that we come from. There's a philosopher, Michael Sandel. He's a Harvard professor and a very, very sought after speaker, who in his book, The Tyranny of Merit, goes further than this. He, in fact, attacks the very idea of a meritocracy. And he says that, we have valorized this idea. We have, put it on a pedestal and said that's an ideal state of affairs, that we reward merit. He says what we call merit and the system that we have constructed has been designed to produce a few winners and many losers. And it rewards the former disproportionately. And he says this is the fundamental flaw. Why do we accept the fact that there will only be a handful of premium business schools and the IITs, and they will deserve very, very disproportionate rewards as against everybody else? Why have we created this caste system? It's our construction. It doesn't need to be the case. Societally, we have allowed ourselves to believe that there must be a few winners and the rest must necessarily, by contrast, be relative losers. He goes on to ask an even more fundamental question. He's saying that why should prestigious degrees make such a difference? And I think it's telling that we use the word prestigious to describe these degrees, because that's what it is. It is a part academic rigor, but there is a lot of it that is just social prestige. It is a form of currency. It is a passport to a better life, not just in terms of material comfort, but in terms of the kind of social respect we get. It determines who you get married to. It determines where you stay, the kind of life you have. One degree, one competitive exam is what makes the difference, such an enormous difference between how you turn out in your life and how. The question is that fair? And in any case, are they great measures of ability? Is it that the people who go to the IITs and IIMs are the only ones who have ability? Is the idea, and what are the kind of abilities that they test? Why should that kind of a difference in some specific abilities make such a telling difference for the rest of our lives? I think it's a question worth pondering about. Lack of equity, because it is invisible, takes many forms. I think the workplace is a great example, because a lot of us believe that, particularly if you're in the private sector, if you're working for large companies, there is no ostensible lack of equity. I mean, it doesn't matter what your background is. What matters is your work. Your educational background may matter, but apart from that, really nobody cares. There are a lot of people who say that I'm caste blind, for instance, in India. I have no idea what caste I come from. So, I mean, caste cannot be a variable in my life. And a lot of them are right. They're not lying. They may genuinely be caste blind. They may genuinely not know which caste they come from. But caste filters run deep. They are not that easy to dismantle. And there is a great study that was done in 2010 by Thorat and Atwell. They call the study Caste is Not Past. And essentially what they decided to study was whether there was any implicit bias in the way that companies recruited people. So only for the private sector they did this exercise. They constructed 3 sets of resumes with where people from different backgrounds. The only difference in those resumes, they were identical resumes, same kind of the students, the candidates came from the same kind of background. They had the same kind of educational, qualifications, and they had the same kind of experience where that was important. Except that the surnames were different. The first lot had identifiably upper caste surnames. The second lot had identifiably Dalit surnames, and the third lot had identifiably Muslim surnames. Apart from that, there was no difference. There was no other mention of caste or religion in the resumes. The only difference was the surname. And then they sent out these applications and they waited for the interview call. And the only variable that they looked at was whether at the first instance, the resume got you a call to the interview or not. What they found is that Dalit surnames were 68%, only 68% as likely to be called for an interview as against upper caste surnames. And Muslim surnames were only 35% as likely to be called for an interview. So 65% of Muslim candidates were weeded out purely on the basis of the surname, 32% of Dalit candidates on the basis of their surname. Now, this is a staggering number. This is not even, you have not even met those people. You have not assessed them. They are not sitting opposite you. You have not absorbed how they look, how they talk, how fluent they are. Nothing. All you have done is on a piece of paper, you have looked at the names and you have prioritized. Now, it would not surprise me that in an overt sense, the people who are making these calls were not discriminating consciously on the basis of caste or religion. In some cases, they might well be, but in a lot of cases, it's an unconscious filter. They were tasked with, weeding out a lot of applications, eliminating a lot of applications, and they used an implicit variable in their heads without their being aware of it. It's interesting how, it gets so legitimized. I mean, this whole idea that I think all of us in India would have grown up with this concept of coming from a good family. What does that mean, coming from a good family? It essentially means coming from a background of some privilege, of some education, of some financial comfort, implicitly in the idea that you have a preference for people who come from a good family. You are actually discriminating without in any way believing that you are. So therefore, it is impossible. It is important, to make the invisible visible. It is important to call this out. It's important to become more aware of the fact that we have these unconscious filters. The starting point of equity and eventually equality begins when we are able to look at this whole issue in our own selves, becoming aware of our own internal lens. And it's interesting that now we have started using language. I mean, we talk about our privilege all the time. In India, we've started talking about being Savarnas. It's not just discrimination does not only happen against people. Discrimination also happens for people. And unless we recognize the positive discrimination, the discrimination that we have taken advantage of, it becomes impossible to believe that any attempt to redress that balance, to correct that balance is fair. We will always believe that it's unfair. Equity and measures to bring about equity will always seem unfair to those who have been the beneficiaries of those advantages. And therefore, it's very important to begin this whole debate with ourselves, with our own selves, to look within ourselves and to ask ourselves as to what are the advantages that we've enjoyed, and therefore to be much more open to the ideas of equity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your incisive talk. Thank you everyone for attending the event, and a special thanks to our two wonderful speakers. Thanks again and have a great evening.